Well, the former Veterans Affairs Secretary David Shulkin is out of a job. You probably know that. Still in the news, though. The reason has to do with how he became the former VA Secretary and why it might matter to the White House. Here he is on CNN's New Day.
I came to Washington with the commitment to make our system work better for veterans. That's the commitment that I went to work every day. I continue to feel strongly about that. There was no reason why I would resign.
So why don't you just say you were fired?
Well, I think that's the alternative to resignation. I received a phone call saying that the president wanted to make a change, and that's certainly his prerogative to do that, and that's what happened.
Now, for its part, the White House says that Shulkin resigned, was not fired, which brings us to why this might matter. I'm joined by Mike Shields and Kirsten Powers. Mike, does it strike you strange that the highest office of the land that they can't seem to delineate whether someone was fired or resigned, and does it in fact matter?
Well, the reason it matters is a legal matter in terms of what the acting VA secretary can do, but in terms of what the American public cares about, it doesn't matter. If the president wants you to resign and sort of forces your resignation, the law gets kind of gray about whether or not you're fired or whether or not you're asked to resign, and therefore you've resigned after being asked. But the reality of the matter is, look, we have to understand who Shulkin is. He was in the Obama administration. He was appointed by President Obama, and President Trump kept him. Then he got caught up in a scandal where he and his wife were abusing their office and getting tickets to Wimbledon and flying around. He didn't handle that very well, and the president wanted to make a change. And I think the American people are fine with that. And until our veterans are getting everything that they need, we could have 4 or 5 VA secretaries, and the country's going to go great. I hope that they keep getting rid of them until someone's doing the right thing. And so I think this is an inside sort of baseball kind of conversation about whether or not he was fired or resigned. And in reality, the American people are going to go, I hope our veterans are getting the care they need.
Kirsten, I mean, you do think if Shulkin did resign, there would have been some kind of a paper trail here that the White House could have easily produced that. And of course, this comes against the backdrop of, we know for a president who is famous for saying you're fired, actually does not like to be the person who fires anyone, which is obviously somewhat ironic.
Right. I mean, if he resigned, and then there would be a resignation letter, and so they should just produce the resignation letter. The implication, I guess, is that there's this Federal Vacancies Act, and if the person resigns or dies, then you can temporarily fill the position. So it does have some implications for how you get the next VA secretary. So the White House does have some interest in this. But I think that, again, if he resigned, people typically in the government do, even if it's very brief, do a resignation letter, and then they should just produce that.
Mike, I mean, this isn't the first time there's been a shifting narrative on a personnel issue from the White House. Does that say something about how the president's being served by his own staff or how the White House is organized?
I think it says something about his style more than anything. I mean, he wants to make a change, he makes a change, and there's previous presidents have had all kinds of sort of layers of bureaucracy around them. This president doesn't like to operate that way. He's in charge. He's the communications director, he's the chief of staff, he's the head of cabinet affairs in this case, and that's the way he likes to operate. That's the way he was successful. He came to Washington, D.C. to be a disruptor, and so it's always going to look weird to political analysts like me that are watching this administration because it hasn't been done that way before, but he's going to do it the way he wants to do it. And if he wants to change out the Veterans Affairs Secretary, he's going to do that. And again, I think the American people are fine with that. As long as things are getting better and our veterans are getting the care they need, that's what the American people are going to care about, and they're not going to care about his style of how he did it.
Kirsten, do you think this style of running the White House is working for this president? Is protecting him, is working well for him?
I mean, it may be working well for him personally because this is his style and this is how he likes to do things. And Mike is correct. He is free to fire whomever he wants. I mean, he put these people in place, he chose them, and he's free to fire them. I do think there is some sort of lack of decency, which I find problematic, which is, if you've ever had anybody who's worked for you, which I think we all have, this just isn't how you treat people who worked for you. That you should, I think you should have the conversation if you're going to fire a cabinet secretary. But if for some reason you can't, I think that you do it in a way that is less publicly humiliating. So if people don't care about that, I think that's kind of a sad commentary on our country. But I do think that there is just this real lack of decency, and it does obviously go very much against his sort of macho bravado that he loved to fire people and was always firing people, when in fact he doesn't actually fire anybody.
Yeah. Kirsten Powers, Mike Shields, appreciate it. Thanks very much.
Thank
When we
you.
continue, a close friend of the president weighs in on the president's tweeting, DACA, and more.